story of gray market importing begins with a name, Ralph Nader. Nader owned a Chevrolet Corvair. These Corvairs were known for their axles collapsing underneath themselves if the cars exceeded 45 miles per hour. The problem with this? Crashes, of course. Ralph Nader was an attorney and caught wind of a legal case involving a Corvair. After he looked into this case, he launched an investigation into American car manufacturing companies, and what he found was quite troubling. The result? His book, Unsafe at Any Speed. This outed the dangers of the ways car companies had cut safety out of their processes to save money. In his book, he highlighted the many ways American car companies chose profit over safety. In response to public outcry and Nader's book, the National Motor Vehicle Safety Act was passed in 1966. This act enforced new regulations for safety on American car manufacturers. These regulations formed a challenge and divide for multinational car manufacturers. European divisions within the United States had to change their cars to fit these new standards, thus producing a Euro spec and US spec vehicle. Pictured above, on the left, is the United States spec Mercedes 380 SL, with, in my opinion, and many others, large unattractive bumpers. And on the right is the Euro spec 500 SL, which was not offered in the United States due to it not being conformed to US regulations. The result of this divide? Unhappy Americans. But what could solve this new crisis? Gray market importing allowed Americans to obtain the cars they really truly wanted, such as this R31 GT-RS, Lamborghini Countach, and BMW E21 323i. This era started in 1966 and seemed like a dream. In 1985, an estimated 60,000 cars were imported, and out of that, 22,000 were estimated to be Mercedes. 22,000 Euro spec Mercedes? That's actually quite a lot. This number upset the North American division of Mercedes, and as a result, Mercedes of North America spent nearly $1 million to lobby the end of gray market importing, so their profits would no longer be stolen by its European brother. October 31st, 1988 was the end of an era. On this day, Mercedes of North America finally got what they wanted. The Imported Vehicle Safety Act of 1988 ended gray market importing. The final nail in the coffin of this practice was a new 25-year wait for cars to be imported. Therefore, any car that wasn't 25 years old could not be imported into the United States from any foreign market. But why should we care? Why should everyday Americans care about an issue that seems to be lying with car enthusiasts? Well, this issue runs deeper than the looks of cars. In my research, I found that European cars are safer. The safety standards in European and the US are different and cause divisions of car manufacturing companies to produce different cars. In Europe, the cars aren't required to have massive bumpers, reflectors, or catalytic converters like their US specification cousins. The debate then rests on a claim of which division within car companies makes the safer car. In 2013, in 38 of Europe's 51 countries, the crash death rate, the rate at which people died in car accidents, was lower than in the United States. In comparison, the United States had a rate of 10.6 per 100,000 people involved in crashes. The 38 countries all had a death rate lower than 10.6, and the remaining 13 of the 51 had a higher rate. Many people may think it's the drivers who are behind the numbers, but Europe has double the population, so that means double the death rate, right? Well, as the facts stated before show, that's not the case. Unfortunately, the 25-year law hasn't been changed, and is still causing problems for Americans today. While there may have been disparities in the 1980s, these differences have continued since then. Both of these models are E46s in the BMW 3 Series lineup. Both of them are from 2004. But over here we have the 325 Xi wagon, known as a Touring, with a 2.5-liter engine. And over here we have a 330 with a 3.0-liter engine. While there may not be very many differences between the two, there's one big one: the engines and the capability and the top horsepower. This engine was only offered in sedans in the United States, while in Europe and other locations across the world, this 3.0 engine was offered in Tourings. 3.5 versus 3.0? What does 0.5 of a liter make such a difference? Well, I'll show you how much of a difference it really makes.
Oh, fuck.
While the 330 with a 3.0 didn't win by much, there's still a lot more power under its hood. However, when I started my hunt for a car, I initially wanted this engine in a Touring. Much to my dismay, I found out a 330 Tourings weren't made for the United States. So therefore, I guess I'll have to wait until 2029 to get my hands on a 2004 330 Touring. And in my opinion, I think that's a stupid amount of time to wait for a car that really isn't competitive right now. While lowering the wait to 10 years or even 5 would be amazing, it's very unlikely. However, BMW has crafted an extraordinary version for the US, and while there's better options elsewhere, I can stand to wait with what I have right now. Luckily, I found an awesome brand, and the engineering has been top-notch since the start. Another piece of my BMW family is a Eurospec 323i, as I mentioned before. It's neat to have something so rare as a piece of my BMW family. As far as we know, this car was imported in 1982 using the gray market, something that unfortunately we can't do today. But really, it should be changed. The time should be lowered, because things are different, and things are way more progressive than they were when these laws were created. The world's top innovators have created a new way to test cars and create standards. NCAP. As the statistics before stated, it's saving lives. The globalization of NCAP is the key to saving lives. Across the nations that have adopted its practices, the death rates have been lowered. The creation of laws in 1966 and the amendments passed in 1988 have contradicted the results that the government had originally hoped they'd produce. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration should adopt universal car safety and emission standards because of the inability for Americans to obtain various cars due to multiple nations currently using different standards, which, in turn, have resulted in saving lives. The proof is currently being displayed across Europe, Asia, and Australia, where lives are being saved and protected in their cars on the roads. If NCAP standards are adopted by the United States, true globalization can occur. All nations will be on the same platform for vehicles, and consumer equality can be achieved. The current standards are not holding their value in today's global market. These standards were created over 40 years ago and should be looked at with a skeptical eye. The true innovators of this age are progressing forward by using programs like NCAP, and the United States will propel to their level by adopting the same standards. At its current rate, it is almost a joke for the United States to call itself a first world nation. With other nations progressing and adapting, the United States still produces cars at standards set from the 20th century. The adoption of NCAP would bring the United States into the 21st century and make it a contender in the game of innovation.
Okay.